Happy 4th of July and happy 250th birthday to the United States of America. I'm going to deep dive into the NHL offseason today and then touch on some other points that are going on in sports. With that being said, let's get into it. All right, it's been a crazy offseason for the NHL. Actually, it's been nuclear. Offer sheets, blockbuster trades, some decent signings, but overall a pretty weak free agency class, or unrestricted free agency class, I should say. So, the NHL has been turned upside down in the span of a week. I mean, you got 21-year-old center with an offer sheet that would make half the league, choke on their coffee. You got veterans signing short deals to chase one more cup. You got teams trading picks like they're going out of style. It's chaos, it's glorious, it's terrifying, and I'm going to break it all down. Draft winners, draft losers. The Flyers-Karlsson thing, that's got every GM's attention right now. The Leafs and Lightning and Capitals making moves, and 5 teams that frankly have been a disappointment. So let's start with the draft. Everybody likes talking about the draft like it's a crystal ball. It's not. It's a lottery ticket. But some teams walked away with lottery tickets that look a lot better than others, and some teams walked away with many lottery tickets. So the big headline, the team that got the number 1 overall pick, the Toronto Maple Leafs, they took Gavin McKenna, winger out of Penn State. Maybe he's a center, I don't know, but looks to be a franchise player. Looks to be a player that could tilt their lineup. That's kind of the pick that changes the conversation overnight for Toronto. Immediate upside, immediate buzz. That's a win for them. Now, the other team that I thought was the real big winner, the Sharks, 3 first rounders, 3. You don't get 3 first rounders unless you're doing something right. They restocked the cupboard. They got size, they got skill, and they have options. And that's how you rebuild without kind of admitting that you're rebuilding. Other winners include teams that converted, picks into multiple high-end prospects. The Blues did a nice job of turning assets into depth. Smart, methodical, patient. That's how you build the pipeline. The losers, well, they're always losers. The teams that traded away picks for short-term help and didn't get enough in return. Teams that reached on players because they panicked. Detroit's move on Casa. People are going to watch that one for years. If he becomes a starter, fine. If he doesn't, that trade looks worse and worse. The lesson is draft capital is currency of the future, and you need to spend it wisely. So now we get to the whole thing of this offer sheet, the Flyers and Karlsson. And it's got the whole league pretty much talking right now. 21-year-old center, franchise player, 5 years, $90 million. I mean, come on. That's a statement in the NHL. A contract like that, $18 million AAV, I believe it is, per year. That's a declaration of war. You want to change the market, then that's what you do. You want to force a team into a decision that will define their next half a decade, then that's what you do. So, Anaheim had 7 days from the moment that this was offered. 7 days to decide, do we match and lock ourselves into $18 million a year for a kid who's still growing? Or do we take 4 first rounders and try to rebuild the depth around a new timeline? And there's no easy answer, because if they match, they keep the player, they pay the price and cap flexibility, but they, should tremendously have an upgrade, a very upgraded roster after that. If they don't, then they get the picks, right? 4 first rounders, which again, currency for the future. Either way, the ripple effects of this decision for Anaheim will be enormous. Now, they will end up being a huge loser this offseason just for this upcoming year if they lose this player. They haven't done a whole lot in free agency. They didn't really have that great of or impressive a draft. So, this would just be kind of an overall stinker for them unless they're just, listen, we're just going to go into a full-on rebuild, see what we have for this year, and make decisions that way going forward. So the bigger point, in my opinion, the league-wide point, is that this changes negotiations for every restricted free agent in the league. I mean, teams will now have to consider the possibility of creative front-loaded deals, teams using cap gymnastics to land these players. It's going to make GM sweat. The only caveat is, if you're the team making the offer, you're going to have to part with a lot of picks. And it's going to make general managers who thought they had a plan, kind of rethink everything. So, and the players, they're going to see the ceiling move up. The market just got reset and retested here. And especially if Anaheim decides to decline, to me, that's just going to signal that this is just a more aggressive league now. It's a league where GMs aren't going to be they're not going to be afraid to make chances like this or take chances like this on these type of players, because it could alter their franchise for years and years and years to come. I mean, this is a 21-year-old player. So, free agency, for the most part, other than that, it's been kind of weird. Not a very strong class at all. The ones who mattered have moved, like, Sergei Bobrovsky to Toronto, which that's a great deal for them. You could argue he's had his ups and downs, but in the playoffs, experience matters. In a short series, a goalie, who's been there can steal games. They needed stability in the net. They got it. That's a move that definitely improves that team. And it's another signal, from Toronto. We're not waiting. We're going now. We believe we have a window now. So, strong move by them. John Carlson to Tampa. 2 years, big money. Big power play quarterback type of player. You want a guy who can log top pair minutes and make the power play hum. Then that's Carlson. And Tampa's window is still open, and they don't plan on it shutting anytime soon with a move like this. Next, we had Ovechkin, who's back. He's back with Washington on a 1-year deal. Look, it's very sentimental, but it's also smart. Low cap hit, high impact on the power play and in the locker room. Washington keeps its identity. Low risk, high reward move. Can't argue with it. And then you've got the veterans that are still on the market, like Patrick Kane, Anthony Mantha. These are guys who can still change a lineup. We'll see how long teams wait to pounce on these players. Some of these teams wait until the season starts and then they pounce. That's just the market now. And as far as the free agency aspect of it goes, the unrestricted free agency aspect of it goes, it's a lot more about measured risk, shorter deals, veteran rentals. So, because it's been so weak with the unrestricted free agency class, trades have been the lifeblood of the offseason so far. Some make sense, some make you wonder if the GM forgot his coffee. But Calgary, trading Blake Coleman and Ali Amada to Minnesota for Brock Faber and picks. Look, Calgary's trying to reset. They're trying to stockpile picks. They want a younger roster. Minnesota's adding depth and grit, and it's a classic past, present versus future type of trade where teams are just in completely different situations, and it's a trade that I think made a lot of sense for both teams. Nick Paul moving between Toronto and Tampa, goaltender swaps, depth swaps, whatever you want to call them. These are the moves that matter in a 7-game series. Role players, penalty killers, guys who do the dirty work, they make all the difference. Now let's hand out the grades. I'm going to do report cards for some of these teams here. But here's the quick take. Winners are teams that added clear upgrades without mortgaging the future. That's how I'm going to grade this. The losers are the teams that either overpaid for marginal gains or traded away draft capital for short-term hope that's not guaranteed. So you asked for disappointing teams. I'm going to give you 5 of the most disappointing teams so far this offseason, in my opinion. Number 1, the Anaheim Ducks. Okay. The Karlsson situation is a mess, no matter how you slice it. Match and you're cap strapped. Don't match and you lose your franchise center. But I understand the picks. But either way, for the short-term clarity and everything going on with this team, this team's going to get a D for this offseason. I don't believe they're going to match. I think they're going to let them walk, and I think they're going to take the picks. Minnesota. The Wild came into this offseason as a contender, and so far throughout what's going on so far, it looks like they're going to leave the offseason with a lot of questions. They moved depth pieces and didn't clearly upgrade the top end of their roster. You need scoring and goaltending that holds up in May, and right now just looks shaky. Seattle, the Kraken built to be a steady contender, but so far their offseason moves have been underwhelming. They have a decent core, but they needed a top 6 scorer and a power play specialist, and they didn't get one. And so far, that could be considered stagnation. Vegas Golden Knights, perennial contenders, but this offseason kind of feels like they're treading water. Cap juggling, aging core, not enough impact additions. They're still dangerous, but the margin for error is small. All 3 of these teams, Minnesota, Seattle, and Vegas, I'm going to give them a C. Ottawa Senators, looks like they're going through a promising rebuild, but the timeline's kind of slipping away a little bit. They needed a veteran bridge or a starting goalie. So far, they haven't gotten one. Development is great and all, but you need to show progress. So I'm going to give them a C+. You could argue that they're also a C, but I think it also matters where these teams are currently and the state of their franchises, and they have been in a professed rebuild. So here's the bottom line. The offseason is a turning point. The Karlsson offer sheet changed the market. The Leafs and the Sharks won the draft. The Lightning, Leafs, and Capitals made moves that basically just cement this we're all in approach. We're not waiting. And, I think what to look out for upcoming is obviously the Anaheim's decision on Karlsson. The remaining unrestricted free agents, Kane and Mantha, where they land definitely matters. And cap moves. Teams will start juggling LTIR, bonuses and creative structures to make this all work. So that's it for the NHL. Let's get into some news in the NBA. All right, so in a really wild move, and I think it's one that's not so surprising to everybody who's been following along, but Jaylen Brown gets traded to the Sixers for Paul George and a ton of draft capital. This was a move that I understand, from a clubhouse perspective, maybe the Celtics needed to make. Maybe this was just not going to work any longer. However, really disappointing if you're a Celtics fan, because as soon as the finals were over, the Celtics were the favorites in many sports books to come out of the East and make it back to the NBA Finals with their current roster. So, impossible to say that this isn't extremely disappointing for Celtics fans. Now, for the Sixers, you just got two-way wing scoring and a guy who I think is a real gamer, especially when it matters. Philly just flipped the switch on their entire window and how everybody is going to perceive them in the Eastern Conference. And this is the kind of trade that's going to force other teams to respond. But the thing is it's already getting late in the offseason in the NBA, and there just aren't many ways for teams to respond to this as of right now, unless you get some blockbuster trades, or unless one of these contending teams in the East signs LeBron, that, would totally change the conversation. And if it's the Sixers, then look out. So, some other news: Walker Kessler to the Lakers in a sign and trade. Walker Kessler, gives them some rim protection, some rebounding, a real defensive anchor. The Lakers definitely solved the problem that they had in May, and that was a big one. So I would say so far the winners for the NBA offseason, because we did cover a lot of it in episode 7 when I had my brother Zach on. I would say the Heat, the Sixers, and the Raptors. The Raptors also traded back for Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard back with the Raptors. I think those are your winners of the offseason. And Mitchell Robinson signing with the Celtics shouldn't be a move that people overlook. However, it's just a different team now without Jaylen Brown on it. Now, does that mean that this team can't contend? No. But I think it's pretty clear that this is a team that got worse and not better, even with the Mitchell Robinson signing. So we're not going to call them a winner, and we are definitely calling them a loser. And, this LeBron decision is actually more important than I think a lot of the public understands right now. A lot of the public just sees LeBron as an aging player. This is still a very, very, very effective player at his age, who's going to boost a team, who's going to boost a locker room, is going to give them a point forward. And anytime you could add that to your team, I mean, that's just a win. And he's going to sign for probably the minimum. So it's going to be a huge, huge move for whoever gets him. And right now, it looks like it's coming down to Cleveland, Miami, or Golden State. And, the longer we go without a decision being made, the more I'm going to think that he wants to storybook his career in Cleveland. Now, I could totally see him just going to Golden State, trying to make a run at another ring, and going back to the Heat, trying to make a run at another ring with Giannis. I just have a feeling that if he doesn't make a decision soon, it will end up being Cleveland. Now, let's move back into the World Cup. a little bit. The game yesterday between Argentina and Cape Verde. Cape Verde gave Argentina all they wanted and then some. This game went into extra time. If Cape Verde had not made a huge, and I mean huge, mistake in the beginning of extra time with a missed kick inside of their own box, and because of that missed kick, the ball heading out, past the net out of bounds for a corner, and that corner resulted in a goal for Argentina. If it had not been for that play, we could be talking about what was, would have been beyond Cinderella. Would have been the biggest upset in the history of the World Cup. I don't think that's even a question. Cape Verde has a population of about 500,000 people. The story, though, for them is still amazing. They showed a ton of heart, and to be able to stick with the defending world champion Argentina national team is just incredible, man. It really is incredible. It's a testament to their management, their coach, their goaltender, who is obviously tremendous. And man, you're killing yourself today if you're a player on that team, because that goal by Argentina, to retake the lead, opening up that extra time, to me that was the difference maker, man. It was Argentina jumping on a huge mistake for a team that just doesn't have the same kind of overall quality and experience in big moments, and it showed there. But a really tremendous game, and it's been an amazing World Cup. Right now it's Canada and Morocco. Morocco looks absolutely awful. Their expected goals are like 0.2 right now, based on what's going on in the game. If they win it, it'll be a miracle. I don't see that happening. And I will be doing a preview episode tomorrow for the U.S. men's game on Monday against Belgium without Balogun, a tremendous player who's not going to see any action in this game for the U.S. So we'll see how they deal with it. But again, happy 4th of July. Everybody please be safe. Don't drink and drive. Get an Uber. Always get an Uber or a Lyft. Whatever. Never drink and drive. Be safe. If you're handling fireworks, please be safe. Don't be a knucklehead. With that being said, I'll see you guys next time.